I've always considered myself a performance artist that uses yoga to get across my message. And the message is really simple: love wins. Set me as a seal upon my heart. Set me as a seal upon your heart. Right? Love is as strong as death. So that's the main thing. There's only one practice in yoga: opening the heart. And we're going to open the heart in a different way tonight. First of all, are there yoga teachers in this room? How many people are teachers here?
Raise them high. Come on.
Raise them high. Oh my God, good, very, very good. Well, so first thing we want to start you off is like, don't take yourself too seriously. Take your practice seriously, but not yourself too seriously. So it's really important for you to have a whole series of bad jokes. He knows how bad they can be. So these two guys are outside of the cathedral in Mexico City, and one guy has a begging bowl with a cross on it, and this other guy has a begging bowl with a Star of David on it. All day long, the people are passing by the guy with the Jewish star, going to the guy with the cross, and like putting their arms in the room. The head bishop of the country is watching this go down, and he has to restrain himself at the beginning, but he's a man of control. But by the end of the day, he can't take it anymore. He goes over to the guy with the Star of David and says, "What are you thinking? This is a Catholic country. Don't you see what's happening all day long? The people are passing you by, going over to putting the arms over there with the guy who has the cross on his bowl, and you have nothing. What are you thinking?" The guy with the Star of David looks up and says to the other guy, "Hey, Moshe, look who's teaching the Greenberg brothers how to market." Should I stop there or I digress? No. Anyway, now another thing to get across is I'm in a multicultural world. It's imperative at this stage of the planetary evolution to respect people's ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. And it's hard to do that if you don't respect your own ethnicity and cultural background. Which, remember, if you look at the grandiose ideal of America as a melting pot, so many people came from another country and wanted to leave behind their tradition and Americanize themselves. And there's an aspect of that that's understandable, especially if the vice-like grip of tradition prevented you from moving ahead in your historical moment into something that was new and perhaps necessary from that which was outmoded and obsolete. Nonetheless, I think that people look to the United States now, not for free market capitalism or what's going to happen with Hillary and Bernie and Donald Trump. What they want to see is it possible for the coat of many colors to actually happen here? Because if the United States can role model for other people the hybridization, the cross-fertilization of all these different cultures, ethnicities, religious beliefs, or no belief, sexual orientation, blended families, all the things that have changed over the last 20 to 50 years that have made today's society so different, but yet it's a model, because if we can do it, people still look to that aspect of the United States where the possibility for individual freedom and opportunity is greater than any other place in the world. And I'm sure that many of you have traveled in other places, and you know, there's great things that happen in all cultures, and yet there's still something in the United States that is unparalleled, even with all the shadow stuff that we could deal with in terms of what our government does. That's not so kosher, but nonetheless. So this is my next story. So when I tell these stories and share things about my life, it's not for you to have insight into my autobiography. It's for you, hopefully, to resonate with something about your subjective life and take it to that place where you need to. And in order to do that, you have to think symbolically. And that's what this is all about. How do you think symbolically and not historically and literally so you can understand spirituality? And of course, getting into art in all forms is the best way of doing it, because artists have no problem cross-culturally. Dancers and mimes and poets and painters and sculptors and cooks and musicians and singers, they get it right away. They're beyond politics. They see the humanity that's common to everybody. But in order to do that, first you have to recognize in your own tradition the beauty of the language, the beauty of the old stories, the beauty of the cuisine, the beauty of the bonding that happens when people have things they share that they recognize as good. This really builds community. But then when you see that, it is almost impossible not to recognize that in another country when you see the other person's music and stories and cuisine and stuff like that. So it's a secondary thing. Anyway, I like to start on Friday also because this is the beginning of Shabbos. I'm from a Jewish tradition, which of course, you know, is a cultural background. It's not a specific ethnicity. You can be Chinese Jewish, right? Or English Jewish, or Romanian Jewish, or whatever. So it's a cultural background, but it carries with it a certain flavoring, you could say. And so I like to start off with a tradition that way to, in some ways, honor my grandmother, who I got the biggest blessing from in my life, and I hope there was somebody who already gave you the blessing. Chances are you wouldn't be here in this room if you didn't get the blessing in some way. But she told me when I was really young, and I know, Arvin, you're going to remember this for your kid, she used to say that when you walked in the room, it was like sunshine coming in. She was an illiterate woman from Poland who came over on the boat by herself, but that was it's the heart thing. That made the connection for the rest of my life. Right, I got it from grandma. Right? So look back and see, did you get the eye of blessing or the malocho? Who didn't give you the blessing? So anyway, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic tradition in the 1700s, told all the disciples not to write down his teachings. And then one day when he was in his house, he saw a demon with a book under his arm. So he said to the demon, what's that? He said, oh, it's the book of your teachings. Then he knew that one of his disciples was writing down his teachings against his commandment. So he called all his peeps together and says, okay, who's been writing down my teachings against my commandment? One little guy sheepishly writes, let me see the book. All right. This is what happens when you don't listen with the ears of heaven. Then the evil impulse uses you for its own intention, and your ears hear what I did not intend to say. I can't make anybody feel my heart. I can only tell you that if you don't listen with the ears of your heart, you won't get this. This will be just like a dry discourse. Okay, but it's not meant to be a dry discourse. It's meant to move you in some way. So before I start the actual PowerPoint presentation, I wanted to give a little background about the things that for me are important about re-enchanting the world. So if this was like a college class together, you know, your assignment would be, you know, to help me understand from your point of view, since I can pour forth, there's no doubt about it. But it's important to draw forth from people. So this might not be the right venue, but I certainly invite you to elevate the conversation wherever you are with people, because that's really one of the ideas behind this, to get talking about these things. So if we're talking about re-enchanting the world, in one way, that word already implies that the world is not enchanted, or the world has become disenchanted for you, or for some people, because again, you can live a very, very good life personally, and yet, you know, like I say, can you have a healthy house in a sick city, or a healthy city in a sick state, or a healthy state in a sick country, or a healthy country in a sick hemisphere, or a healthy hemisphere in a sick world, till at a certain point you realize the interconnection between us all. And you know, you have to start with your square-inch field, but then we have to keep expanding because we're no longer locked into small clans, tribes, and the malignancy through history that narrow-mindedness has often represented. And I'll talk a little bit about what mythology is and how that makes sense to what I'm trying to share. So, you'd have to ask, was the world ever enchanted? What does it mean to have the world enchanted? Was the world at some point animated in a very, very different way than it is right now for the people who lived in it? And how did it get disenchanted? And then, if that's true, how do you re-enchant it? So those would be like the questions for you to ask. What is an enchanted world? Do you believe there was an enchanted world at any time? Was it enchanted for you when you were a child and then you lost it at some time? What does that mean? And then how did you get disenchanted? What turned you off? What made you not be able to cope with the shadow aspects of reality in yourself or your family or your own culture, your own ethnicity, or your own historical moment, right? And then what do? Are you going to have what we call heroic paralysis? There's so much that needs to be done that sometimes you just get like a possum. I'm just frozen. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to put my energy. And it's not like there isn't a lot of things out there to be done, but sometimes you feel it's overwhelming, so I don't take responsibility for anything. And then, of course, if you don't attend, if you're not like a devoted attendant in whatever temple you choose, you won't feel like you're taken care of. It's a really interesting idea. Attend to taking care of something, and you'll feel you're taken care of. Wait for somebody to be taking care of you. You feel like, you know, I'm not taken care of. It's a strange idea. Okay, so I can't give you a sweeping view of history in like 5 minutes, but I'm going to condense it down as far as I possibly can. Up till the Middle Ages, prior to the Protestant Reformation, there still was a participation mystique. A participation mystique. It's a phrase that was coined by an anthropologist, Levi Strauss, to indicate the way primal people, and when we say primitive, remember the word primal, first, not primitive like less developed because they don't have, you know, water in the house or flush toilets and fire at the stove and, you know, that kind of stuff. They're closer to the original intuitions of human life than we are. They're much more in touch with nature in a certain way. And of course, right away, that's the first way to re-enchant the world. Involve yourself in nature and the fascination that happens in a non-human, wordless transmission. And remember, God doesn't speak in English, by the way, just in case you're not clear about that. The alchemists were probably the last people, and anybody not clear about alchemy, so I can go into a little side riff here? It's okay to raise your hand and say you're not sure about that. This is a really enlightened audience. Everybody understands about alchemy? Listen, I've been a university professor for many years. If I see that blank face there like that, I'm a little suspicious, okay? Yeah? Okay, I'm not so sure. Right. I've also had therapy, so I'm a suspicious guy. Under the guise of turning lead into gold, at that time in Europe, the resources had been completely devastated, which was why the colonial powers, the imperialistic powers at the time, were looking for new areas to rob, right, where they didn't have laws or, you know, people who they could see as less than human and take whatever they wanted. The alchemists were the last vestige of symbolic thinkers because they couldn't say directly to the church, what we're really doing is psychological exercises on how to find what they call the philosopher's stone, the enlightenment experience for them. They couched it under certain kinds of symbols using chemistry as a way to hide behind the psychological inner work that they were really doing. They were the last people to take on the Hermetic tradition and bring it into Europe. So all the things that we know from books we've read about Kabbalah and numerology and astrology and tarot and the various divinatory oracular modes that were used by people, from the Protestant Reformation on, that fell out of vogue. That fell out of vogue because they destroyed ritual. From that time on, as soon as the domination of capitalism came upon the planet, some major shift happened in all of humanity, and unfortunately at that time I would say the Western world kind of trumped every other tradition, and still to this day the world is reeling from what we've done to the world, first by, of course, trashing nature and not recognizing our connection to what's supposed to be a sustainable habitat for everybody, forever. Okay. But they let go of ritual. Catholic Church kept it going, but once the Protestant Reformation came, all symbols were gone. And I want to talk about why that's important and how I'm going to weave this into what we're going to do here. First of all, understanding mythology has to do with understanding meaning in life. One of the saddest aspects of contemporary society, and to a certain extent the world, is that all of the ancient cultures had a story that was a sacred canopy, that was an umbrella that covered the people, protected the people against what? Against the terror and awe of reality. They did not have science to understand what was going on in the same way that we do. At any moment, something could break in and erupt on you that you have no control over and you can't understand, whether it's a natural cataclysm or the invasion by people who are interested in taking over your territory, enslaving you. When we say the word myth, we think falsity or lie, because you're looking for a one-to-one correspondence. Myth is not something that's provable. Myth gives you meaning. It tells you where you belong, but you can't prove it. So now I'm going to digress again because I'm a Cancer. You have to understand the difference between fact, simile, and metaphor. A fact is if I say, have you seen the new lion cub at the San Diego Zoo? Oh, you haven't? Well, go check it out. You don't have to believe me as something that's palpable, tangible, measurable, visible. You can go to the San Diego Zoo and go to the big cat cage yourself and you can say, oh, yeah, that's true. That's a fact. A simile is when you compare two unlike things and make it sound like they're like each other. I woke up this morning, had a cup of Kodiak roast. Oh, I feel like a lion today. Okay? I am not a lion. But I'm making the connection between that power and sense like I'm in my own environment, you know, I'm on top of the food chain or whatever, I'm going to take on the world and, like a lion, right? So I'm taking two unlike things, a human being and a lion, and I'm making them as if they're like each other. But a metaphor is where you take two unlike things and identify them as being the same. So I have a dream, and in the dream, I'm on the beach with the rabbi, and the rabbi tells, not with words, just telepathic communication, follow me. And without taking off his clothes, he jumps into the ocean. I hesitate for a second, and then I think, that's foolish, you know. I jump in after him, and I totally let go. I can't drown, impossible to drown. I'm totally being buoyed up by the ocean. And then I wake up. And then I say, I am the Lion of Judah. That is a metaphor. Now, I cannot argue my case in a court of law factually, but neither can you disprove in the metaphoric world that I am not the Lion of Judah. It stands on its own in a very, very different way of how our consciousness exists. So you have to decide when you're looking at how to enchant the world. In some way, of course, we're trying to change things that are factual, but a lot of what I'm really trying to say is you have to learn to think symbolically. The moment you start talking about spirituality, you have to give up 100% the historic and literal meaning, which I'm not saying doesn't have some meaning, but if you only see things historically and literally and don't learn to think symbolically, poetically, metaphorically, psychologically, imagistically, you will not be able to penetrate these things. All right, so all good mythology is a canopy that protects the people, right? Because it covers what they call mystical, cosmological, sociological, and pedagogical. So from a yogic frame, the first thing that a good mythology does is it hooks you up to what they call Brahman, which is the word they use for that which is beyond the mind's capacity to conceive it, depict it. Like we say in the Western tradition, the first commandment is don't have no graven images before me. Right? Anything you think about what we call God or spirit is an idol. It's idolatrous. The end of yoga is to empty your mind, to have no vrittis whatsoever. There's no concept you can choose to try to depict what that is, right? Anything you say is wrong, and then words are just choices of mistakes, different kinds of mistakes. So that's why you don't fight over something that has a transcendent quality to it, because the word itself implies it's beyond. So the first good thing of a good mythological teaching is it hooks you up to the mystery. It makes you realize that everything comes out of the superessential darkness. 99% of the known universe is dark. We know dark matter. We don't know what it is. So it's always absurd to me when somebody says, I know the mind of God. Yeah. Unbelievable blasphemy. So I think. So it hooks you up to the mystical part, which means it's a mystery. Shakespeare in Love, it's a mystery. Nobody knows. But are you in or not? Don't say you're in lightly, because what that entails to say you're in is to expose yourself to the nightmare of history and to all of human suffering. You in? You want it? Every ache you're going to experience with your kid, right, is because you said yes. We're not going to abort. We want this kid. Yeah, but now everything, right, is going to happen as a result of that. It's not all going to be pleasant. Are you in? Absolutely. Exactly. So now he's not playing with bad faith. Do you understand what the game of life is? Right? Because at the toughest level to face, every day that you're alive, somebody else is going to die. I always like to start my classes by saying, I'm very, very happy to be alive today. I'm very happy to have another opportunity to share the gift of yoga with people. I worked in hospice for many years. This is part of how I got some of this stuff. And I can tell you, we all woke up today. A lot of people didn't. And for some of you who will be here tomorrow, I hope I will be here tomorrow, a lot of people won't. Never take a day for granted. So this is the first thing. Are you fully in life, knowing that it means that you're going to die? And if you stay alive long enough, you're going to bury your grandparents, your parents, maybe your spouse. God forbid your kid goes before you, right? Ready? Ready for that? Otherwise you're playing with, I'm hedging my bet. I'm not really fully in. Oh, really? Well, then the mystical teaching wasn't given to you to accept it all. All. The terror and the awe. That's what the myth did. It gave you a canopy, a covering. So there was a meaning for you. So that as you faced the terror and awe of life, which is both awesome and awful, it makes sense. Not in the court of law, but in the metaphoric court, right? Because all these structures, all the ancient traditions were nothing but what I call plausibility structures. It presented a certain kind of reality with no ability to prove it's true. But it's axiomatic. Everybody buys into it. And then the culture can aspire and do what it does. Once you hook up to the mystical, then comes the cosmological. All of the ancient teachings had a way of showing you its latest science, its latest up-to-date image of what they thought reality was all about. Its Genesis story, how we got here. As Joseph Campbell says, there's no war between science and religion. The war is between the science of 4000 BC and the science of 2100 AD. We know a lot of different things about reality than the ancient people did. They had tremendous intuition about human nature, and yet at the same time, they were totally off. Just like, the founding fathers made some phenomenal statements in the original doctrines of the Revolutionary War. But they were also slave owners, right? And women didn't have privileges. So these things side by side exist in us. This is who we are, right? So next, it gives you the cosmological story so you understand how we got here, the Genesis story, what is here all about. Then it gives you the sociological story. And here's where we're going to be different than the ancient people. Every ancient mythology bound the social group. It is a binding for the social group so that you knew who you belonged to. It was clear you're in this tribe, you're not in that tribe. Love was always for the in-group. Hate was always projected on the out-group. And every mythology was based on the land mass where you lived. That framed your view of reality. So for instance, in Turtle Island, which is the Native American name for the United States, if you look at, one time the whole eastern seaboard from the East Coast to the Mississippi was one forest. How about that for an image? One forest from the east, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. Can you imagine that? So the people who were like in the forest dwellers, they were worshiping the deer because everything was woodland for them. But then you get to the Mississippi mound builders where it was flat before you get out to the plains, had a very different mindset, very different totem animals. You get to the Plains Indians where the buffalo was there, very different mindset. You get to the Southwest where it was all desert, very different mindset. You get to the Pacific Northwest where the trees were just growing very different mindset. Each group had its own mythology based on where they lived. Okay? And it served to bind the people together. We have the same symbol sign system. Except that now there is no one landmass. All those teachings are passé and defunct, at least for somebody like me. all those transcendent things that once carried meaning for those people, it doesn't fly anymore because it can't be limited to a small social group, what I call malignant tribalism in its worst form. It has to be planetary. Once the astronauts showed the view of Earthrise from the moon, it became clear we're all here. All divisions are made by human beings. They don't really exist. Right? We're all here. Everyone's crew, no one's passenger. So they teach you the sociology, but we have to create a new sociology. I believe it has to be planetary, but I don't want to be too glib about saying that because myth does not come from the left brain. Myth comes from the same place where dream comes. So you can't really think it up ahead of time with your left brain. We can kind of be sure it'll be planetary, but other than that, we really don't know. Even if you're a lucid dreamer, even if you're a person who's learned how to awaken yourself in your dream, ask any lucid dreamer, but do you know what you're going to dream tonight? And they'll say, no. I just know that when I dream, I've been taught to learn how to stay awake and move it around, right? We don't know, but probably be planetary. The fourth thing is the pedagogical teaching, which is the individual education to help the young boy, young girl, young man, young woman face the vicissitudes of life and the eventualities. Give them the wisdom, the traditional wisdom, so they can deal with it. So in yoga, of course, I said the mystical teaching is about Brahman, the one without a second, the one before whom words recoil, the one who can't be soiled by the tongue. The cosmological teaching has to do with the 24 principles in yoga philosophy, how it somehow filters down, and Einstein says matter is spirit reduced to the point of visibility. So it's their version of how these different cosmic principles finally precipitate, move at a slower rate than the speed of light, where you can't see it as energy, and becomes like a particle, right? Even though it's a pretty hard reality. I mean, physicists would tell us how much space there is between these things, but it's pretty solid at this level, right? And then they have the sociological teaching. In yoga, it could be the varnas, the caste system, the ancient tradition, right? How they had the different levels of, their version of Downton Abbey or whatever. Right? Or the ashramas of life, the stages of life. You're a student, you're a householder, you're a forest dweller, you're a recluse, whatever. That's the way they parcel out the side. That's their sociological teaching, you see. Binds the people to what you're going to be living as you get older. And then comes the yamas and niyamas, is the pedagogical teaching, the basic ethics to get people's head screwed on straight and not create such negative karma. Got that? All right. So one thing is to understand mythology. And if I had to say three things that are going to re-enchant the world for me, remember this is all before we just get into the visual stuff, which gives you the affect image, as we say. Even if I don't make a commentary, the pictures itself should hit you in the gut. That's like when you look at a Tibetan tanka or an Indian poster, right? It's so garish, there's so much going on. I mean, if the docent isn't there to explain to you, you have no idea what it is. But you do understand it at some gut level beyond your left brain. You get it right away, okay? So that's what this is all about. Nonetheless, I would say that there are 2 or 3 areas of main re-enchantment for me. The first has to do with gender ground. The relationship between men and women has to make a huge leap in favor of the future as female. Okay. Women's role in society all across the world, and of course there's many other countries that have already had women leaders, although they can't be there unless they're a little hawkish. But the need for the feminine insight in all public spheres is so long overdue, it's ridiculous. However, this is not just a matter of trying to get women there. For me, this is a matter of defining what gender ground is all about, or gender domain is all about. And now this takes us back to what benefit did ritual initiation serve for the primal peoples, something which we do not have in our culture. We have public education. So 2 very, very different ends. So just in case you don't know about this, let's just have a quick flyby view. It is really clear that at a certain age, a young boy or young girl needs to be taken out of their parents' house and have a clean snip of the umbilical cord given over to the elders, and then you are taught certain things that the uninitiated, meaning younger boys and younger girls, are not taught, because this is only taught to the initiated, to power you up to step into your adult role where it's no confusion about what's being asked of you and what your responsibilities are. They never made the mistake of letting a teenager go off and have freedom and think, they'll just evolve. No, no, no. Never did that. Now again, I can't speak for women, of course, but I do have one thing to say that's really, really clear about men's need to deal with their violence. You know, bears can be very, very aggressive if you attack their cub. Ask any mother, you know, about how she will defend her child. It's not like women don't have their own, you know, take names and kick ass aspect, but history does not show marauding bands of thousands of women going to other countries, raping, pillage, killing. No, that doesn't happen. 99% of all the people who die in war are men. 99% of all the people who work on oil rigs and coal mines and nuclear facilities where there's a high degree of danger are men. 99% of all serial killers are men. 99% of all drive-by shootings are men. So this is a shame of our gender. Women, you can't help us with this. This is one aspect of what ritual initiation is. Because when you have a young boy whose testosterone is just all of a sudden burst on the scene, mom can't handle him and is not supposed to handle him. He has to be ugly to her to make the break emotionally. He has to be taken by it. Now, this is where I can't speak for women, and again, unless you've been initiated by an older woman, I don't know if you would know this or not. But my view is, nature shows a woman in a certain way that she's a woman once she starts to bleed. Okay. A guy, just because he starts getting facial hair, you know, and sperm can come out all of a sudden, he still doesn't know he's a man. In the tribal cultures, without the active intervention of an older, unrelated man, you can't turn a boy into a man. And what you learned to do was to teach him what to do with his aggression. Don't clip it, don't kill it. Foster it, nurture it, encourage it, but turn it to the service of the community. That's what's completely lacking all over the world. So one thing is to define gender ground, gender domain, the dance of the genders. And I don't know how women do it, but are there secret societies of women in primal class? Absolutely. I don't know what goes on there, but I can only tell you what goes on in the secret societies, the men's things that I'm involved in, right? Without breaking confidentiality, of course. But you understand that? So one of the things that you learn about empowering people to go into their own gender domain is each gender has its style. Each gender has its beauty. Each gender has its power. Each gender has its own tools. Each gender has its own weapons. Right? Guys, don't women have weapons, right? Doesn't have to be a gun and a knife, right? They can take you down with a look, with a word, with your... You know that, right? Respect it. But you need that. It's really important to cultivate each person because we're also mysteries to each other. We're like the dark side of the moon. There's a part about the other gender that just, I don't get it. I still amazed when you just, right? Missing. It's a mystery, right? But it's fascinating, isn't it also? Now, what you have to think of is this partnership. It's not patriarchy versus matriarchy, it's partnership. Now again, this is an agricultural metaphor, but we have to find the contemporary metaphors that make you understand this. The men plowed the field. The women planted the seed. The men used the hoe. The women watered. The men harvested the grain. The women threshed it or thrashed it. The men milled the grain. The women baked the stuff. Each domain clear in its own power. One needs the other. The whole process gets mucked up if one group doesn't do what it's supposed to do, assigned to do, is capable of doing it, does it really well, better than the other group. So we haven't found that yet. We haven't learned to recognize the beauty, the power, the depth, the dancing style, the humor, the tools, the weapons of the other gender. This is essential for us to go ahead and to help women, because, you know, guys, they're not going to do it without our help. Guys don't want to give up the power. The status quo doesn't want to give up the power, right? Right? But remember, significant action doesn't happen in the field of the familiar. So we have to chart something completely different than has happened before. So from my point of view, it's like, you know, empowering women. You know, I'm fortunate. I got a power wife and two daughters, right? And you know, 85% of the entry-level students are women. So I'm in a good position to be able to do this. But they certainly need our help, and we want them to come because they're more intelligent in a certain way than we are, and certainly more compassionate than we are. So that's one thing. Dance at gender ground, really, really important. Second thing for re-enchanting the world for me is the importance of reestablishing the elder. Every one of these communities that passed on traditional knowledge or lore, L-O-R-E, did so because somebody was the wisdom keeper. Somebody maintained the tradition. Somebody remembered the chants and the mantras and remembered how to do the liturgy. And why is that important? Because if myth collapses and there's no sacred canopy to cover people, people feel unprotected. And rituals are embodiments of myths. Rituals enact the myth. And what the ritual does is it helps you connect to the myth. Personally, so I feel connected to it. Interpersonally, between you and me, we share things together in the rituals that bond us together. Then we do things as a community or a whole, so we're all bonded together. And then we even create rituals that connect to another tribe, another clan, another nation. And then we're all connected in the same way to this one thing. That's completely lacking. We've secularized everything in our world, which in some way, of course, is good. But then, you know, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. We were missing something by losing the importance of ritual. So the elder is the person who's the keeper of the old traditions. And the elder is the one who has to empower the young people. So I often say, as this is one of my teachings, you listen to enough of my tapes, you'll hear this. He says this again and again, and he must really think this is important. When was the last time you looked at a younger man or younger woman and told them how wonderful they were? Did you do it yesterday? If you can't even remember, because so many people are lost in what I call hunger significance. Hunger significance. When I go to my friends who teach in elementary school, right, you know, I'll go to the kindergarten class, you know, bring my guitar and the talking stick, you know, and get the outfit on, whatever, like, you know. The kindergartners, the first graders, they're so excited about having a special person. They're all like a puppy dog with a tail wagging. Recognize me! Oh, see me! You see, right? They all want hunger significance. You think adults are any different? You've just toned down the facial expression. And remember, yogis are the most covertly depressed people that there are. Because yoga people can manipulate the chemicals at will and feel good and stuff all the psychodynamics so you don't deal. You make an end run around the family mess, right? You know, it took me 17 years before I had sanitized myself enough to say, okay, I'm ready to go back in, right? So far be it me to tell anybody else about avoiding your family stuff, but the elders are the one who let the young men and women know, you're magnificent. I see you. That's great. You got a gift. Go out there and share it, right? Because if you don't power them up to do battle with the belly of the beast, they'd end up like us, not having ritual elders who told them how wonderful they were and made them feel really good and confident about themselves to take their place as leaders in the next generation. You ever hear people talking, bad-mouthing young people? How are they going to be the leaders? How are they going to be the people who take over? If when you look at them, you just see somebody who's like pants are hanging down below his, you know, his tush, right? or holes all over, you know. That's where spirit gets in. Or whatever our misunderstanding is, right? Isn't that true? That's what the whole again. Nobody wants to visit a sealed garden, You have to open this up. So you have to bless these young people. But if you didn't get it, it's very hard to role model this. You're still lost in hunger significance. Who's recognizing me? Who's recognizing me? You know, so that's what we call body and fender repair. If you need to have spiritual vitamins in the form of somebody saying, you're really good, you do that really good, go out and get that, by all means. But then move on. Move on. And so don't let a day go by. And this is what we call shadow king or shadow queen. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Maybe it'll come here. Who's the fairest of them all? Ooh, Snow White? Don't like that. No. A good king, a good queen, a person who's in their power space, who knows they are where they are because they've been put there for a reason, to share their resources abundantly with everybody. You're secure. That's how you know you're in your king and queen. Your anxiety level goes down because when you're connected, right, the force is flowing through you. But when you're not connected, you don't want to admire people, you want to be admired. You don't want to praise people, you want to be praised. You don't want to compliment people, you want to be complimented. You don't want to set it up so that you tell people how great they are. You have it set up so people are mirroring you and telling you how great you are. That's it. You haven't found the thing that makes you secure, that can't be taken away no matter what. So that's the thing. The elder is there to not only pass on the stories and the teachings, but to empower the youth to step into the position that they're going to take. Right? And you have a vested interest in making sure that they're ready to do this. Now again, I don't know what your view of grandma and grandpa were, but I always remind you, people, if they're still alive, right, you know, and you haven't asked them enough of the questions about what their childhood was like, you're missing a huge opportunity while they're still alive to find out about your great-grandparents, their mother and father, right? And your great-great-grandparents, they may have a memory of their grandparents, right? So within 1 or 2 generations, you're going to already be dead to the blood and bones that got you here. And make a disconnection where all you're going to have when they go is like, you know, the china. Right? Or the confirmation dress, or the old lace, or whatever it is, which is a beginning, it's an image. Right? But while they're alive, don't miss this opportunity now to create some healing, because you know, I can't speak for how your generation was, but you know, my generation was the type where, you know, the post-World War II generation, we got the education they didn't get. But we weren't smart enough to ask them, what was your life like when you were young? Tell me about your grandparents. I just wasn't clear enough to realize that was important to me when I was a teenager. Okay. And they didn't sit me down and say, sit down, let me tell you what life was like back in Romania or Poland or whatever they came from. Because they thought they were going to Americanize, and they wanted to leave the past behind. So there's no blame here, but each one was responsible for not picking up what could have been a connection intergenerationally. So if you still have the opportunity to do that, fine. Or if your grandparents are not alive, but your parents are still alive, ask them. Because maybe they have some stories that you never heard before. Don't wait for the funeral for the stuff to come out. So the restoration of the elder, that's another really important thing to get across. When I grew up, there weren't elders. I didn't respect older people at all. I was from the generation that didn't trust anybody over 30. Till my teacher said, you're going to be 30 next year. It's time to start hanging out with other people who are not young. Okay? Wow. That was Ram Dass. Okay? Yeah. So, mentoring people, taking an active interest in the life of people younger than you, easily done by having, if you have a gift, you know, mentor people in music, or mentor people as a coach in sports, or, you know, it's more like life coaching. The technique is secondary. The technique is secondary. It's the time you spend with them, the FaceTime, or I call it face blogging now. Forget the internet, face blog. Oh, you mean talk? Yes, conversation is intercourse for the soul. Talk to each other, that's really good, face blogging. So one thing is the gender dance. Really important to understand more about your own gender. And for men, it's developing what I might call the wise man or the ancient of days. For women, it's called the crone. Now, it's a tough word, even if you say juicy crone, to try to, like, you know, jazz it up a little bit. It's one of those words that's, you know, a stigma for women to accept. I don't want to be a crone. A crone is like some old hag with, you know, warts on her face, and, you know, really? This is what they've done here. The witch image is only a negative and pejorative thing, so you don't want to grow older, and especially in our country where the accent on women, especially men, I don't know if you're even aware of it, just like, you know, you walk down the street, most of the time you're not concerned about whether or not you're going to be accosted by anybody. You don't think about that if you're a man too much. Women, it's in the background all the time. You're not worried about being harassed. They are all the time. We get much more for letting our bodies go to south, whatever, you know. You know, what women have to face in this culture with 17 magazine and maintaining a certain youthful, nubile, sexy mindset all the time, forever and ever. What a distortion of the season of your life as you get older. Can't be done. The crone doesn't do that, though. The crone empowers you to accept the different seasons of your life and as your body ages, and the wisdom that your body teaches you. Really, really important to recognize how you're going to look at your aging process as a gift that you're going to share with younger people, and of course the life wisdom which you're going to harvest as a result of that, which is what you're going to share with them. So look at the elder thing and the mentor thing especially, taking an active interest in younger people's lives, because you want to give that. Who are you going to give your legacy to? Right? It's a healthy person who wants to contribute what they have, says Alfred Adler. And just in case you're not sure, let me just share this little psychological tidbit. We say in the psychological world, one of my degrees is in psychology, so I'm throwing this out there. They say that behind every superiority complex is an inferiority complex, and behind every inferiority complex is a superiority complex. This is basic Adlerian philosophy. So that means if you walk around thinking like you're hot shit and trying to convince the whole world to bow down and kiss your ring, right behind that is a whole bunch of thoughts of how insecure you are. And if anybody knew who you really were, what a charlatan you are, right, they would just like flip you out. And then the opposite is also true. If you walk around with an inferiority complex, where you feel like, poor me, I got nothing going on, I got no clout, I can't do anything of significance, I'm not beautiful enough for anybody to love me. Right behind that is, you should bow down and kiss my ring. So just flip around with that, because if you think like, well, I can't mentor anybody, right? You're going to the inferior part of you, oh, you don't have anything wonderful, but go behind that, you'll see, no, somebody should recognize me for this great thing, right? Yeah, so the re-enchantment of the world, participation with nature is number one. Get outside as much as you can. You know, I got an inflammatory disease a couple of years ago, and it brought me to, like, you know, the closest I've been to like a death experience in a long time. And when it got down to the level of, like, you know, if you're going to die, what do you want to do? What's left to do? You know, it became really simple. It was like back to being in California when I was a young man. Be outside as much as I possibly can. Play guitar and sing every day. And be with your friends and laugh. It got down to something really, really simple. But being in nature was the first thing that I connected to. I don't want to be indoors. I want to be outside. I spend too much of my life indoors. I want to connect to the non-human aspect of nature. And we come out of nature, right? Understand? We don't come into nature from outside. That's a weird metaphor from the Western tradition. God blew the breath of life into Adam's nostril. So it implies that life comes in from outside. But, you know, the Eastern philosophies have a much more organic understanding. Life flows from inside out, like a seed has the template in it, and then it bursts forth and come out. So we come out of nature. We don't come into nature from outside it. So we're one with nature in a certain part. And you can really understand the non-human part of nature. And I said, God doesn't speak in English. You want to get a transmission in wordless silence, be in nature. That's the first way. Second way is reinvent the gender ground. We have to find our own way for ritual initiation because it doesn't exist and it'll never, we cannot go back to the primal peoples. That just is, it's not going to happen. We can glorify what they did, but they were crazy in other ways. We're not going to go back that way. But what we can do is understand the metaphors that they were trying to teach. So the modern metaphors to understand ritual initiation, and this is why you have to think symbolically, is transition states. Right? They gave the transition state as a puberty rite for a young adolescent. That was the first rite of passage. But there are many, many initiations. We don't have that. A bar mitzvah is not a rite of passage. A confirmation is not a rite. You're still living with your parents. You're still, no, it's not. The real key is transition states. That's where something erupts in your life that you didn't want to happen. Something breaks through, destroys the status quo. Things can never be the same as a result of that. Somebody dies. Okay? Transition state. Divorce. Not only just for the people going through the divorce, but if there are children involved. Major transition state. It's an initiatory motif. Hospitalization. Got sick. Broke my arm the night before the big volleyball championship, and I'm the main server. Major initiation. Moving to another city, just when me and my friends were getting major transition. Off to the war, whether you come back or not, right? When I think of my 3 football friends who didn't make it back from Vietnam, major transition. Drug overdose, major transition. Driving the car drunk, didn't mean to do it. My friend got killed, I'm still alive. Major initiation. Get the idea? All transition states are modern initiations because they take you down. You've got to descend into the stuff that you didn't want to happen, but you don't have a choice, it did happen. Now you're going to deal with it. Ritual initiation teaches you how to go down, but it turns it to the service of the community, or usually the deity, the divine exemplar, whoever is the guiding principle for your society. So you can look back in your life and you realize, even though nobody said this to you, it might be more mundane. It might have been Aunt Betty teaching you how to use the fork to make the special thing around the edge of the pie, you know, or the secret spice. You got initiated by her. Didn't know that. When Uncle Joe took you to the cabin, showed you, this is how you get worms at 4:30 in the morning, and you want to catch, you know, bass, and this is what you do. Wow, I didn't realize it was initiation, right? You're not going to have the romantic fantasy of like going to Sedona and finding some Indian with turquoise around his neck who's going to give you peyote up on the bluff and then put you in the magic circle till the hawk comes in. No. You've read too many books. It doesn't happen that way. Sorry. Not like that. You know. So if you look back in your life, you'll see that you've had many, many teachings that were given to you, but if you didn't recognize them as such because you weren't thinking symbolically, you only saw it literally and historically, you missed the whole idea of the initiations that you went through. Got that idea? Yeah, so stay in nature, do the gender ground, and work towards becoming an elder yourself. Right? I grew up looking for the ritual elder. I ended up turning into the ritual elder myself. I had no choice. I didn't have any other way of knowing what to do. And then I picked up pieces along the way. Right? And now every opportunity I can create ceremony or talk about this stuff to bring it up to people, I will. All right. So that was my little beginning. Which says till 8 o'clock. We have till 8 o'clock, right? All right, here we are. All right, so now this is just kind of free-flowing. Just enjoy the pictures. How are we doing here with is this okay? The sound is still good? Right, lovely, great. We can edit out anything we want, right? Enchantment. Fairy tales. I'm big on fairy tales, besides poetry, right? Because poetry is language that condenses images, and you have to penetrate to the language. It's the same words that are used in left brain conversation, but there's something else there. You got to see through it, see beyond it, whatever. Fairy tales are fantastic for that because you realize they bring the other world in it. That's the difference between a folk tale and a fairy tale. The other world is involved in it. The other world is everything this world is not. And they say the things that are needing to be healed in this world can only be healed by what's in the other world. And there are things in the other world that need to be healed, and they can only be healed by what's in this world. But the other world has all these figures that, if you don't understand this yet, there are no fire-breathing dragons, no matter how much you love Game of Thrones. There are no red-eyed witches with hooked nose trying to get kids to come in and shove them in the oven. No. There are no unicorns. So at a literal, factual level, you got to let that die. But at a metaphoric level, yeah, that world is just as alive archetypally as it has ever been. It's hardwired into your nervous system, in fact. Because everything phenomenal is a metaphor, says Goethe. So what are these metaphors? So maybe you've seen some of these characters in Disney movies, or you read stuff like that. But all of a sudden, this world is very alive. Very alive. And it's not nice. There's some nasty things here. Right? Evil can't just be put down easily. This is another really shallow understanding of the modern mind. If evil was so easy to defeat, we would snap our fingers and defeat it. I once asked my rabbi, is good more powerful than evil? He said, yes, but not by much. So, are we open to this world? Well, if you're open to this world, or if you want to make this world alive for yourself, the first thing you got to do is praise. I saw the Lord, I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. High and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. The angels cried, holy, the angels cried, holy, the angels cried, holy is the Lord. Isaiah 6. Go into it. Make ye a joyful noise unto the Lord. Tagore says, God respects me when I work, but loves me when I sing. You got to carry around a certain level of elan, vitality. Right? The vitality of a vital person vitalizes. Bring your stuff. We want to see you strut your stuff in a healthy narcissistic way. Because if you don't get enough of it when you're 2, which is appropriate, right? When a 2-year-old walks in, every eye goes to that kid and says, oh my God, that's unbelievable. But when you're 12 and you do it, you're kind of like a brat, If you're 22 and 32, then you're saying something is off with this person for sure. But when you get the message, the first thing is it brings a certain exuberance into your life. You're joyful. And even though the issues we're talking about in terms of reclaiming some sacred quality to the world and helping to redeem nature and recognizing the importance of honoring the genders and becoming an elder in order for you to mentor the younger generation has some really serious implications in it, but you carry it out with simcha, or joy, as they say in the Jewish tradition. It's not enough just to do the letter of the law. It's bone dry. You got to carry it out with joy. Then you get not just the outer body or the guf, you get the neshama, the soul of the teaching. So that's really important. And what precedes that is you have to invoke the presence, to evoke a response. This is what free will is all about. Spirit or deity cannot just come in and take you over like a possession state. That would be the black magic aspect. Spirit stays aloof. It's like the mother cat off doing her thing, but as soon as the little kid goes, she comes up and picks it up. You got to cry. A contrite heart is the only thing that's that's an acceptable offering to Spirit. Not the perfected you. That's not what Spirit wants. The broken, open, lowly part of yourself that's humbled because of the suffering that you're going through. Now the transmission can happen because you're off your high horse. You're not trying to pretend you're further along than you are. It's one of the journaling questions I usually ask people. What's the story you tell everybody else to make it sound better than it really is? And what's the story behind that you don't want anyone to know? That's the one you bring to Spirit. I mean, Spirit knows it already. It's not like you have to admit it because, Spirit, the omniscient, doesn't know. No. It's for your benefit to be able to articulate and get it out and bring that to Spirit. So you can call it prayer, and you get the benediction, right? Otherwise, this is the wrong kind of enchantment. You're under a spell. You're under a spell of the Uber culture. And the Uber culture doesn't give a fig about you. You're just a cog in the wheel. No, got to get rid of that. Bewitched, the curse, yes. Remember the curse, the poison apple. She didn't want to allow Snow White to be more pretty than her. Only sees the badness in the world. Now, does that mean when you become joyful and you recognize all these things that you're blind, that you don't see? Of course not. You're not a fool, but it doesn't help people to only tell them what's bad about them. And especially unasked for advice is a form of abuse. So who the hell are you to tell me what? Don't tell them. They don't ask you. See what's good in the other person. You know, if you see the person as they are, you make them worse than they really are. You see the person as they could be, you make them what they should be. So there's an attraction that exists at a planetary level. Gravitational forces. In a certain way, you can say we are all slowed down light. We are all stardust in a certain way from the original Big Bang. But we're held together. We're spinning in harmony with these gravitational fields. That's one of the reasons why I think, getting high in yoga, so to speak, and you'll see the transition, is a really important thing. You've got to flip your consciousness out of the mundane or day-to-day or pedestrian way of doing things in order to allow a perspective that is not that to take its place. That's going to expand your consciousness, as we say, broaden your consciousness. So it doesn't matter what way you do it, the ecstatic way of like the Mevlevi dervishes whirling around till you get so out of your noodle, right, that you don't mind singing Jacques Brel songs. You can dance, you can sing till your head goes to spin. You can dance, you can sing till they put me in the ground. Yeah, like that, fine. Education must be a pervasive life experience, not just a subject. Otherwise, you can't provide an integrative contact for full life function. And of course, every culture has its own version of singing, dancing, ecstatic trances, right? My understanding was, remember, I'm an old psychedelic freak, so I admit that maybe my research has prejudiced me towards this one side. But as I understood it, the inability to go in trance was seen as a dysfunction in tribal society. That you couldn't get out of your body, but it was socially sanctioned. You didn't do it as like a naughty boy or girl getting high for kicks behind mom's and dad's back, and it's illegal. No, it was socially sanctioned, usually connected to a religious ceremony, a vision quest or something that you're going to do it, and then you're going to go back to an elder who's going to help you interpret what happened and how to now get it. Now you got a new name. Oh, I didn't know who I was before. Now you got a new name. And the name signifies an aspect of how you're going to be. So, Bhakti Yoga, chanting the name of the Lord, make you free, whatever. You got to get ecstatic. Right. Another way of getting ecstatic to re-enchant the world is find your sacred space. Right? We probably could make a really interesting pool of knowledge here about all the places we've been around the world and some of the incredible spots we've seen. Why did people pick power spots like Machu Picchu or Tulum or whatever? Right? Whether you believe in the ley lines or not, I've been to, anybody been to Stonehenge when they allow you to go into Stonehenge? Right? You'd go in there with a dowsing rod like that, and you get one that moves this way, and you realize something is happening. We don't know what it is, but they feel it. Now, how do you know what's sacred space? It's regenerative space. Remember, for all ancient cultures, yoga included, there was no such thing as a profane life. Profane means outside the temple. Everything was pregnant with religious significance. You built a house, religious activity. Planted a field, religious activity. Getting ready for war, religious activity. Making love to your spouse, religious activity. Making utensil for food, religious activity. However, religious activity, although filled with significance, isn't always regenerative. When I work for my family to do my job, right? Long hours, 18-hour days and stuff like that. I love what I'm doing. It's fantastic, but it's tiring. It doesn't always regenerate me. I have to do something in addition to that, even though it's filled with religious significance. It's a dharmic activity, right livelihood. Great, I'm doing it. I'm so tired at the end of the day. It's not sacred space yet. I have to find that place where when I go to, what is sacred? Sacred means you go back to the origins. For all sacred space, by going there, you're back at the beginning, where all creativity comes from. So you start again, you're born again, as they say. Second birth in India, they give you the sacred thread. Right? If it didn't do that, you didn't find sacred space for yourself. And for me, most of it has to do with nature. So there's different kinds of power spots you can find. The former head of the Chicago University of Chicago History of Religions Department, Mircea Eliade, another great codifier of so many cross-cultural teachings, he used to talk about the different kinds of powers that people can experience the divine through. One is called a kratophany, K-R-A-T-O. It means when power breaks through. You feel the awe of the lightning, or the tsunami, or the earthquake, or the fires that are going on. The raw, unmediated aspect of nature and its potential catastrophic impact on human beings. There's nothing we can do about it, right? But you know there's power there. Theriomorphic, when the animal, the creature teacher comes to you, right? You can get a transmission of the divine through your cat or your dog or a dung beetle or whatever. Just watch any National Geographic show and like, how do they find these things, right? So, but it's outside of the temple. You got to find what regenerates you. Consecration, to be set apart as holy for purposes of worshiping God. Like I said, one of the problems with a secular society is we don't think anything is holy anymore. We brought everything down to the same level. And that's certainly not how the ancient people thought of it. Life itself is holy. Just to live is a blessing. To make your life an offering to the deity. God is an idea whose reference is transcendent to any image or form. We have excised all supernatural elements out of our religious teachings, except for those of psychological relevance. So you have to find your own way to take what our religious teachings, or I like to say spiritual teachings, like religion is the banana peel, spirituality is the banana. You have to unpeel the outside, the exoteric aspect of it, to find the kernel of gold that speaks to you psychologically. Because the images become mirrors that are psychologically operative for what's going on inside yourself. That's how you know you've connected to a specific deity. And by the way, getting back, I digress, in terms of gender dance, I don't know this as much about the Indian society, but I certainly know this about the Greek society, which is much closer to us as Western practitioners. When you had a problem, you went to the specific temple of the deity under whose auspice that power was. So if you're having trouble in your love life, you might go to the temple of Venus or Aphrodite, because she presides over all those erotic, sensate experiences. If you're having trouble with your anger, either you're anger management freak and I can't control myself, or you don't get angry when you should be getting angry. There's things that should rile you up. You might go to the temple of Mars or Aries, because that's the feeler. Your business is in the crapper, right? Then you go to the temple of Mercury, because he was the god of crossroads and transactions and so forth. So they had a place where you would go and sleep in the temple, and the deity would give you a dream, and then you'd wake up and you would know what you have to do. It's an interesting idea. All right, so if you're going to do this, you're going to have to go your own way. Other people don't see it the way you do. They don't feel it the same way you do. They don't explain it the same way you do. And we're all at different places in terms of where you are, in terms of readiness to take on a teaching and do it full blast, or like, not sure if I do this, how much is going to change me, hedging my bet a little bit. You never know when you meet another person. They say a person is like a hot pepper. Till you cut them open, you don't know what's really going on inside. Right? So it's hard to judge another person with what's going on. But one thing I can tell you is, A, you're as happy as you make your mind up to be. Like you wake up in the morning, switch, flip on. It's that simple. Happiness is not within the field of self-consciousnness. You can't know you're happy. This is one of those weird things, right? You're dancing this morning, you know, to Shoot to Thrill by AC/DC, naked in your bedroom. Then somebody walks in. What happens? Oh, I put the fig leaf on for a second. As soon as I became conscious of what I'm doing, I stop. Happiness is not within the field of self-consciousness. Just live a good life. No rear view mirror conscious checking yourself how well you're doing. And then the toughest one to get, it's not dependent upon circumstances or other people's wellness. And it's as tough as a parent, because we usually say, you're as happy as your least depressed kid, right? But to realize your happiness has nothing to do with the weather or the political situation or the historical moment, or even if the people who you love and care about are doing well and happy. You say, that's not how I have to be drawn. Yeah. The person who's down in the pit, you need to get down in there to show solidarity with them. No, you stay outside of the pit. You're a senior lifesaver, you don't jump in, you throw them the spaghetti thing first. Right? Yeah. They didn't have that when I was a senior lifesaver, I can tell you that. I'm glad they have it now. The Holy Spirit doesn't dwell in dejection. Even though I said the Holy Spirit loves your offering when it's from a contrite and broken open, lowly heart. But it doesn't dwell in dejection. It wants you to be up. It wants you to be positive. It wants you to experience the joys there are in life. And offer your suffering to me, as Krishna says. Whatever you do, offer it to me, including your suffering, to me. So you're not just carrying it around. God knows you're doing that. So, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't buy anybody's spiritual promises. They're all con jobs. You're just pursuing somebody else's idea instead of allowing Spirit to speak directly to you. How does Spirit want you to live? Never seen on land, air, or sea before. So it's hard to even describe what it is, because part of it is you're creating it as you walk it. Can't even tell your friends what's going on. I don't know. I can't even see around the next bend. I'm not sure, man. So it sounds flaky, but that's how a lot of the path is. Right? You've got to take the risk. Like the step into the abyss of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. Right? These are required movies that I have my college students watch because they're so metaphoric. Right? He has to step over the chasm to get to the other side. There's no way he can jump it. Impossible. Not even Evel Knievel with a motorcycle couldn't do it. But he has the tarot card of the fool stepping off the cliff into space. And he realizes, leap of faith, of course. But even though you understand that it's a leap of faith, not until you actually take the first step off does the bridge come out and save your life. Religious veneration of the mindless, as I would like to say. Remember I said all the teachings were plausibility structures that they bought into? Nowadays, no religious tradition is guaranteed that the next generation will have the adherence that the previous generation had. They all have to vie for their market share. And remember, the old teachings, it was a sociological teaching. We didn't have to worry about anybody else. It was just our people. We could think whatever we wanted about anybody else, but we're the important people. Yeah. But in a pluralistic world, not only do we have a secularized world where everything is no longer about the holy, it's about the, at least in Jesus' time, he still could whip the money changers out of the temple. But in our time, the god of economics has whipped all the other gods out of the temple. It's a pluralistic society as well as a secular society. There isn't one answer anymore that is a monopoly on reality. So, what's your vision? Because according to Bhakti Yoga, you have the power to create what you have faith in. The disciple or the devotee embodies the deity that they're worshiping. So you have to ask yourself, what's your God? What are you willing to die for? What do you venerate, really? Not based on anybody else's experience. What has the Spirit taught you directly? You're not sure? Sit in silence, go out in nature, meditate more. Because this is not provable. Remember I said meaning is not in the court of fact. So it's not about what anybody else thinks. This is where you really got to go your own way. You can only take a path, and remember, what I don't like about path is path presupposes distance. And even though I'm only teaching a couple of hatha classes, tomorrow just the inversion class, and it's really not really hatha today. I just want to say I'm a huge critic of postponement. Practicing yoga, thinking that if I keep on going, I'll finally do more advanced poses. So your life is on hold, right? Your whole way of practicing yoga is making what you don't have more important than what you do have. Right? And the Indian tradition allows you to believe in the fantasy of reincarnation, interminable amounts of incarnations to rise up the ladder and get an upgrade to them. Really? Is that what you're doing? Putting everything on hold? Right, so you need time, right? And time is running out, right? You need time. Don't buy that. I think that's the wrong way. You practice yoga not to improve your poses. You practice yoga to redeem your soul. So religious devotion, but it doesn't have to, again, these are symbols. I'm not really worshiping Saraswati and Ganesh. It's to transport yourself into another dimension, that other world, the metaphoric world, the symbolic world, the one that lives spiritually inside you. You're hardwired for this. In yoga, it's called the Ishtadevata, the deity of your heart. You have to find the marga, or the path. Marga here means they used to follow the track of an animal that leads back to its den. Right? Your heart cave. That's it. That's where the deity is leading you. And so you need your imagination. You have to trust your imagination, the images that come up for you. Right? Otherwise, you're not going to create. You could be projecting art on professionals. But you all know that you have the via creativa within you. Oh, you don't know that? I'll just give you a little reminder. If I just say to you, can you think of any positive experience that happened in your life? See where your mind goes to now. Right? Your eyes flip to one side, right, and then you recall a memory, and you bring up something. Right? Nobody has to give you a certificate to say, do you know what joy is? Of course you do. And if I say, and the via negativa, do you know sorrow? Do you know what suffering is? See what comes up in your mind. You go to another memory. Of course you do. Doesn't matter, somebody died, or your puppy got run over by a truck, or whatever. You know. That's where the via creativa comes from. The images from inside yourself. The danger of introspective meditation, and I'm marinated in yoga. I'm not going anywhere with this, but to critique the sacred cow is really, really important. Introspective meditation, where somebody else gives you a symbol and you take it from outside in and you work on that. To me, it doesn't matter what symbol it is. Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. Allahu Akbar. Sri Rama, Jai Rama. They're all the same. They're jingles. They're advertisements, like when you walk down the aisle and you say Count Chocula, or like the granola from Kashi. They want to get in there and tell you what to do. Real creativity works the opposite way. The images come from inside you, and then you produce it outside through dance or mime or sculpting or whatever it is. But where do the images come from? Not from other people, from your own life, from the via positiva and negativa of your own life. That's where the most authenticity is. You don't have to invent stories. You don't have to compare yourself. Your life is deep and holy and filled with spiritual initiations. So that's supposed to transport you, and then recognize in other people's stories, remember? Draw forth, don't just pour forth. And then you can love other people and other denominations that are not your own. So this is the canopy. What's the sheltering, protecting, covering aspect of your life or your society, or the alienation that comes from not knowing who you are or where you belong, what you're supposed to be doing. Here's another nice protective covering, your sacred architectures, right? Something about the way they build things. You know, if any of you ever get a chance to come to Chicago, if you've never been to Chicago, one of the great things about Chicago is all the buildings, you see the old bricklayers. They didn't just like slap bricks up. Every building has some little ornamental thing on the brick or on the roof or something like that. Really craftsmen, people who really, when they weren't worried about cutting the cost down, you know. So sacred spaces, I mean, again, I hope you've not only just traveled in nature, but, you know, human beings are also, culture is an aspect, thank you. Culture is also an aspect of nature that comes from human beings. And right now, both culture and nature are kind of in distress. But if you see some of the things around the world, what human beings have been able to accomplish, and when you're in that space, it transports you to another dimension, just like when you come into a yoga studio in a certain way, right? This becomes a sacred space. Why? Because you do a ritual activity. You take your shoes off, right? Moses, take your sandals off. You're on holy ground. Oh, really? Oh, didn't know that, right? Or you walk in. This is a pretty sparse kind of Zen space, but, you know, you got a Buddha. You got a dancing Shiva, right? You got images around you to take your mind out of the material plane and hook you up to this archetypal dimension, which is already inside of you, but now I'm linking. And it serves to do that. So the space is important. And of course, you have to make one in your house too. And accept the collapse. I know this is hard to do. I'd like to cling to something from the past, but as I said, I think they're all passé and defunct, except symbolically for me. So bridging to the generations, really important. You know, people used to live intergenerationally. Peace, intergenerationally. Now, you know, just today I was on the plane with a Pakistani doctor. So we're talking about, you know, kids and nuclear family and stuff like that. And he was saying, like, in the old country it's still like that, but his daughter lives in, you know, San Diego's here. His son lives in Toronto. They hardly see each other. We have to make the renewal of the connection between the generations. So important. Young need old, old need young. And you need to praise not only younger people, by the way, don't forget to praise older people too. They need to hear it as well. Because, you know, we're not out of it yet, but you can see the coercion of people through political and religious institutions, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. There has to be another way to mobilize people's resources than fear. Cave in, give way. To what? To the dark night of the soul. You cannot, Blake says, without contraries there is no progress. If we could only put the pedal to the metal and think joy, it would be such an easy task. But the material plane comes down half and half. There's darkness as well as light. There's betrayal just as there's loyalty. There's falsehood like there's truth. There's hate like there's love, and so forth. To take a hard look at oneself through a 12-step program or therapy or a good close friend makes you see what you don't want to see. The candor of hearing what you don't want to know. It's really essential. You know, if you're like you're a smart leader, right? You don't surround yourself with yes people. You have a couple of people in the cabinet, you know, who tell you, you know, in your face what you don't want to hear. But you need to be informed about it. And why do you need to be informed about it? Well, it's like going to the dentist, you know, and they show you on the x-ray, you know, and they got the abscess over here like this, you know, I'm going to have to probably either give you a crown or pull a tooth. Ugh, oh, I don't want to know. But why do you really want to know about that? Because you're hoping that if you catch it at this level, it stays local. And if you don't, it becomes systemic and it infects you because you didn't take the prophylactic opportunity to protect yourself when you got the message that you didn't want to hear, but you really do want to hear it. So in the same way, it's hard to tell people who are practicing yoga, who in general have their heads in a good place and their hearts in a good place, to look at the shadow aspect of yourself. It's much easier to speak light and love. But if you go into the darkness, Carl Jung says you do not become enlightened by meditating on figures of light, but by entering into making the darkness conscious. It's a very, very different path. And also, as you may know, Mr. Iyengar was my teacher. He was a scolding guru. He was not a praising guru. So you have to get over the whole idea that the packaging should be sweet and nice. That's one way it gets done. But encouragement through criticism, usually hopefully positive and not sadistic kind of criticism, is another way. You learn either through proximity, by hanging out in the environment and osmose, what the guru has to share with you, or you learn through investigation. Most of us don't want to go that deep and don't want to look that low. Because if you do, again, you're not buying anybody else's story, and then you face what's called the wisdom of insecurity. I don't know. The Irish say the only security is insecurity. Well, that's not, who wants to hear that teaching? I'd rather hear something that sounds better, gives me more hope. Yeah, but hope and fear, remember that's like Aleister Crowley's thing, all who would enter here abandon hope, because hope and fear are connected to each other. Yeah. So this takes a lot to do that. You've got to empty yourself. So I'm saying the loss of force, significance, effectiveness, worth, the brain drain. Do you realize the amount of conditioning that you've been exposed to? You know how much has been force-fed you at a young age when you didn't have a champion to put a boundary between you and what was trying to enter into you, right? Because remember, probably don't remember, but you know, at any time when you're younger, your parent can just push a spoon into your mouth. Even though you go like this, they can pull your mouth. There's not much you can do about it, right? And that's a kind of graphic image with food, but I'm not just talking about food. You know how many stuff has been shoved down our throats? We've forgotten most of it. It's called introjection. It's like, oh, you got to puke that stuff up because it ain't you. Oh, but that's not a nice experience to throw things, right? So you don't want to expose yourself to what you need to get rid of? Yeah. Hold on to it more if you want to. Then you're going to need a jump start. Right? Because the conditioning cuts you off from your emotions. Thinking is secondary, emotion is primary. Right? The cerebellum develops before the cerebral cortex. One of my ongoing teachings, thanks to Deepak Chopra. Right? The stomach hasn't evolved cells of self-doubt. If you walk into a room and have a noxious odor there, your stomach can go, oh, I'm going to puke. Only your head can say, maybe you shouldn't puke right now because it would be socially awkward and, you know, ruin the party and you'll have that disgusting taste in your mouth. This stomach can't do that. It only knows bleh. So that's why we say trust your gut, because if you're feeling it here, you can be pretty sure that's what it is. Emotion is primary. Yoga is not to sanitize your emotions and keep you on an even keel like that. Right? Every system develops certain virtues and neglects others. And this is what you have to understand. Yoga is not just about, yoga is about truth, isn't it? Satya, truth. Right? The truth is if you're experiencing an emotion, you're not supposed to say, oh, I'm not experiencing this emotion because I'm supposed to be peaceful or joyful. Yes, I understand. Buddha is a master of putting the reptilian brain on a leash. I just love saying that to get that on a... But yoga is not supposed to make you desensitized. It's supposed to sensitize you, which means you should be really in touch with your emotions, both how to adequately access them and appropriately express them. And that means sometimes you're going to adequately access and appropriately express negative emotions. The ones that are not so nice, the ones that most of the time we practice yoga in order not to feel those emotions, or to go beyond those emotions. You mean going beyond your humanity? Yeah, the end of yoga is the abolishment of the human condition. Kaivalya, the isolation of consciousness with no content whatsoever. What's human about that? Is that what you're really signing up for? Or did you come here to fulfill your humanity? Would you take an incarnation to become fully human? Take the course. You're already divine. Mr. Anger used to say, if people could just make the leap from subhuman to human, it would be a major leap in evolution, instead of going from human to divine. You're already divine. You come here to do something different. Smart guy. Right? Anyway. Otherwise, we're going to have to give you a jump start in the form of shock therapy, psycho-shock therapy. Some transition in your life that's going to smack you up over the head, and you're going to have to wake up all of a sudden. So better to, you know, this is another one of my long, kind of crazy side teachings. What's the difference between depression and grief? Depression is a passive state. Something bad, really bad happens to you, and you go down. And because you're resisting going down, who wants to be down? You want to be up. Our whole culture, you should be shining, smiling on the face, right? Always on top of it. My A game is always going, clicking on every cylinder. Use whatever metaphor you want. No chink in the armor. What we call the power mom, whatever. Do it all. And Hercules, heroic. I'll take it on my back. I can do it. I don't need help. And because you're not allowing yourself to go down, you don't want to go down, right? It lingers. It pulls you down. And then you don't know if you can ever come up again because you haven't done the work. But grief is an active state. Grief is where you consciously acknowledge, I am messed up as a result of this. I feel like crap. I'm going to mourn, M-O-U-R-N, mourn the loss that has happened through this death or whatever transition has just happened. It is really bad. I'm going nose down into that. I'm not holding myself back. I'm not trying to make it sound better than it is. I don't care how long I'm going into it. And if you can let yourself choose to go down, because you know that is the appropriate emotional response to loss, you have a little bit more choice about when you're going to come up. But if you wait and it pulls you down and you're depressed, you don't have nearly as much agency to do anything about it. So you'll have to have a psycho-shock. Okay. Step into your magic circle, find your place of power, create a space to contain the alchemical work going on inside you. Rumi says, if your inner work is great, no outer work can be small. And if your outer work is small, no inner work can be great. Doesn't matter if you're doing something on the stage of life, right? If your inner work is great, no outer work can be small. If your inner work is small, no outer work can be great. There it is. That's the quote. So once you get behind the fact that you have a part to play in reclaiming the lost stuff in your own past, integrating the shadowy aspects of it, find the things that you love to do, what I call the ego-syntonic things, what I call plucking the strings of sympathetic resonance. You start off with the positive, that gives you the courage and the wherewithal to be able to then look at the negative stuff. So find those things you love to do. Those are the ear whisperings of spirit in your life, right? It's just like when you hit a guitar string or a violin string or whatever, the strings next to it vibrate a little bit like that. That's called ego-syntonic. So you start off by learning about yourself. You try things. I like this, I don't like that. Okay, now you know. Great. And then what happens is, that is like, metaphor, right? A thread poking its head from the invisible world into the visible world. You pull on it. You keep pulling on these threads of existence based on the ego-syntonic stuff, and the tapestry of life starts unfolding. And then you use that to juxtapose against the negative stuff, which you don't really want to go through, but if you're a wise person, you realize, I'm going to choose to go through this with open eyes, and I'm going to learn more about this because it pulls me down, and if I don't deal with it, push the pile under the rug, it just gets bigger somewhere else, and it's going to come out in an inappropriate way in people who don't deserve it. So you're going to be a magician, you're going to juggle the elements. The macrocosm becomes a channel through which you bring it into the microcosm. If you're a tarot person, you understand about that. You work with the elements. You don't have to be worried about dealing with water issues and being flooded by emotion. You work with your earth issues. You don't have to be worried about being buried by the material stuff. You work with the air issues. You don't have to be worried about being swept away. Right? You don't have to worry about working with fire issues. We'd be burnt to a crisp. You juggle these issues and the metaphors that they represent. And then you understand what the Magus teaching is all about. That's what the four suits of the tarot there are in the... But of course, you can always be a black magician. You can always use the supernatural forces turned to the dark side. Spiritual inflation. Mm-hmm. But then again, you don't know who you're serving. He's only serving himself. Right? Whereas, real magicians, that's against what initiation does. It turns you towards a specific deity as a result of that. Once you learn the teaching stories of the tribe or the clan, you become a servant of that. So your service is used on behalf of other people, not power over other people. And then you got to take your stance. Wow, thou shalt not pass, remember? Because if you do this, you're going to enter what they call the magnified zone of power. Once you leave the pale of the village compound, which has grown too small for you, you're going to do battle with the forces of your own ignorance, as symbolized by demons. Right? There are no demons. They just mean limitations within your own consciousness. That's your demon. So that's what you're doing battle with. Your greatest enemy is yourself, not other people. So you're going to face these forces which would seemingly kill you, or dominate you, or terrorize the world. Or, as I like to say metaphorically, monsters roam the kingdom and queendom when the king and queen are asleep on the throne. So by not paying attention to these things, you allow these things to exist, and they infect not only just you, but all the people in your relationships who you're with. All right, we're getting down to it. Today, more than ever, life must be characterized by a sense of universal responsibility. Animated, the ultimate respect is given to what the Creator has brought to life. Life is the supreme gift, not some supposed afterlife. And for another topic, we could talk about different dimensions of existence and whether or not consciousness extends itself post-mortem or not. But like myth, whether it's provable or not is not the issue. This life is real. Here we are. Make this life the biggest gift you have. It's alive. Earth is alive and needs to be treated as if it's a living being. And then if you do that, you'll be brought back to the wonder, the astonishment, the immensity. It's mind-boggling how big the universe really is. No ending. You know that when they put the Hubble telescope up in the 80s, right, so we could view space, not from Earth, but from space. Right? They say that the universe is still expanding from the original fireball blast at 186,000 miles a second, and has been doing that for the last 18 billion years. No edge to the universe. That's a phenomenal...
That's crazy.
It's great. It is. It's mind-boggling. So you talk about like immensity, and I mean, isn't that a cosmology to blow your mind? Yeah, that's our cosmology. You know, I believe it'll be taught all over the planet at some point, except for maybe Kansas.
When is that going?
Well, it's going in a few places now. When that will become planetary, I should live and breathe. We can only hope that way. So then we'll get to him, right? Religion consists of humble admiration of the unlimitable superior who reveals in the slightest details we're able to perceive with our frail and feeble minds. The emotional conviction that a presence of superior reasoning power, which for us it's incomprehensible, that's what he thinks of as God. So, is it a miracle or is it a fluke? Which side do you want to be on?
I say miracle.
Yeah. So it's just like the life of Pi, you know. You want a better story? Yeah. I'd go for the miracle than a fluke. All right. Wow, a lot of slides. So, adore, that's another way, adoration of the Magi. They come to worship the little Savior. The divine child is always at risk, right? Always somebody trying to do it in, prevent it from becoming what it is destined to be. Got to protect that little being. Fence it in, like they say, a little plant when it's fenced in gets a chance to grow, but if you don't fence it in when it's growing, it gets trampled by people or animals and stuff like that, and it doesn't have an opportunity to be what it can be. So each one of us comes in as a divine child, and remember, the child is the wonder child, the part that sees the world fresh, and then becomes the savior. It gives the redeeming value for everybody as it grows. Rapt attention, it's called attention density. It's what neuroplasticity is all about. How do you change your brain? Change your brain by training your mind. Train your mind, change your brain. Yoga is one of the greatest systems for that. It's called attention density. You get so many things going around a specific issue at the same time that you're going to have a breakthrough experience. You cannot actively practice yama and niyama, whether you do it well or not. No one's a saint. You'll fall, but still have a standard below which you don't want to fall. Make a better effort. Do asana, do pranayama, do deep relaxation, do meditation, do devotional service, do devotion, to your guru or whatever your heart space is. Do selfless service as a karma yogi. Mind the scriptures for all the wisdom that's there. Attention density. You're going to have a breakthrough. It's impossible to saturate yourself with that. Hang out in those environments and not have it affect you. Do yoga a little, change a little. Do yoga a lot, change a lot. Right, so I'm sick of my life. Yeah, got to get good and sick of this. Let the old stuff collapse. Didn't work, did it? No. Well, don't try to go there. So, awesomely new to one's experience, the beauty of the demonstration, it grabs you in an unforgettable way. The art form becomes an inspiration to aspire to. And art, all art, reveals eternity, is an epiphany. I love James Joyce's best definition of samadhi in Western literature. Silent, luminous stasis. Silent, luminous stasis. He defines art as either pornographic or didactic art. This is bad art. Because good art arrests your mind, creates what he calls aesthetic arrest. Completely stopped. No vrittis. Pornographic art is any art that seduces you and makes you want what the art shows you. So like when you go to your travel agent, you see like the people, on the ski lift in Saint-Tropez, right? Pornographic. Or Vanna White. New refrigerator, behind door number 1. Pornographic art. Because you want it, seduces you. And then didactic art is where the moralization. This is your mind on drugs. And they show you the egg frying on there, something like that. The compulsory morality, right? More art does that also. Not real art. It has to stop the mind. And when it stops the mind, you have the epiphany, where light shines through. And now the radiance of eternity, which is in love with the forms of time, gives it. You get the revelation. So, silent luminous stasis. And of course, when I see him do the poses, that's what he's doing. How did I know I was a devotee? I digress again. I read once for Ramakrishna saying, once you hear the name of God and your hair stands on end, you don't have to do any more practices. The first time I heard him say, Uttita Trikonasana, I got horripilation all over my body. I said, I'm a devotee. Didn't take much from me. Testing. So, after all these words are done, you're going to go back to your daily life. You're going to be tested. Everybody gets tested. So pay attention to what your test is. Right? It's an evaluation. You got to undergo some ordeal to find out who you are. You want to find out what's ticking inside you, don't you? Yeah. So you can be smart and either put yourself in an environment. When you have a yoga teacher, they say, it's like the man who wants to get out of the rain who jumps into the ocean. If you really have a good yoga teacher, they bring on more trouble in your life. They create more questions than they create answers for you. But it's the right kind of trouble. It keeps you off the street, which is really good, so you can't create negative karma out there when you're in the yoga shala. But you want to find out what's ticking inside you. And a good yoga teacher does that. They inspire you to make you want to go deeper. And they demand of you, especially if you have students who've been coming to you year after year, or decade after decade, right? They demand substance from you. You see your student and they remind you of what you love through their dedication. But they demand substance of you. So you have to go deeper than what you already know. Because once they've heard the teaching, well, now I'm back here. This is week number 2. You got something there? Now I'm back. This is year number 2. Now this is year number 20. You still have something to teach me? Yeah? It's a formidable task. All right. And now, life-saving. Learn some life-saving techniques, some healing techniques, whatever they are. You know, with herbs or pasta sauce or bad jokes or flower arrangement. It doesn't matter. A result or value that you will find that's determined by the testing, by the operations in your own life that lead to the proof or disproof for you, for the acceptance and rejection for you. Because whatever you earn by right of consciousness cannot be taken from you no matter what. And whatever you have not earned by right of consciousness, you can't keep no matter what. And you got to live to the change before the change comes. There's nowhere in this path where, like, you know, you say to the teacher, give me the A first and then I'll study. It doesn't happen that way. You don't say to the land, produce your fruit and vegetables, then I'll weed and water and take it. It doesn't happen that way. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. So you got to do it. Really do it. Live to the change, and then the change comes. And then if you do that, there could be hope for Renaissance, for the humanistic revival, for the fact that there is no specific place, one place that is home. The earth is our home. There is no one specific family based on a culture or an ethnicity or an in-group. There's only the human family. Earth is our home, and humanity is our family. Anything less than that, you didn't get the transmission. So that's how I think you can look at some aspects of re-enchanting the world. Peace to you. And remember, we have some treats. We have some treats for you here. Thanks, provided for by Jean. But remember, I began by saying this, and now I'm saying it another way. You can be a pauper, you can be a king, you can try to do most anything, but you'll never hear the birdies sing if you ain't got love. Thank you. Any Q&A right now? Bring up some questions. Any comments, add-ons? Nice to hear. Yeah, share, please.
So there was a word, this depression.
Yes.
And I've lived half my life outside of this country, and I came back recently, and I just can't believe we have to feel good and we have to take the whatever it is. I'm very surprised about our medicated society.
Mm.
How do you, with your study of the ancients and your study of that whole archetype or that whole image and where we're going, possibly with the Uber culture, do you believe do you really believe in the chemical imbalance?
Oh, that's a component of that for sure.
But it's, so.
You know, I think one of the things that depresses people is they don't have a sense of meaning in their life. And that's connected again to the mythology, which we don't have as a shared vision because they were all tribal in the past. And we're at the cusp in a certain way, but even if you believe in the idea of like the Aquarian age, right? It's another 150 years or whatever before the precession of the equinoxes come. We've already started to move into space age. There's already an Aquarian kind of mindset in terms of, you know, it's not the Piscean age of water, now it's air, now it's space. High-minded science used for the benefit of humanity hasn't happened yet. So we're still there, we're at the cusp, but, you know, truthfully, I said the ancient people had gender ground in a very, very different way. And guys, I can't, again, I know not, I haven't seen any scriptures that talk about the gay lifestyle or, you know, a number of different transgender issues or the LGBT community. It's not mentioned in the scriptures at all. I'm sure it existed, but it's not mentioned there, so I can't make a comment on that. So I'm admitting my paucity of knowledge when it comes to that. But as a hetero male, right, guys, women understand this immediately. I cannot have a relationship with my wife if I can't tell her how sad I am. She's not interested in Mr. Yogi, you know, disseminating joy and keeping, she's not interested in that. I mean, not that she doesn't want to share joy with me, whatever, but I can't have a real relationship with her if I don't tell her what I'm feeling. That's what's important to her. What are you feeling? Right? Whether I'm pissed or not, it doesn't matter. She wants my raw truth. So what do I think that has to do with the ancient teaching? I don't know. I don't have any past life remembrances to know what they did like. I just think that gender ground is really, really important because I know as a man I can say things to my men that I get my ass handed to me if I said it to my wife. But if I kind of work it out with them, they'll bounce it back to me either by saying, give me the support that I know I won't get from her, but I don't need from her. There's a male motive feeling. Or they'll put me in a place and say, you're really off, man. You should go and apologize to her if that's what you're thinking. So again, one thing is more gender connection. Women need to speak more to women and not in a catty way. Men need to speak more to men, but not in a one-upmanship way or a macho way. Thanks a lot for coming, kids.
Where's going to get cookies?
Yeah, go to the cookies. Really important. It's more important. I don't know what, again, I don't try to glorify the past. Remember, there were caste societies. And even in the Hindu tradition, there were goddesses, but historically speaking, I don't think women did really well in their society. So I don't know about the gender. I think this is a potential improvement in modern people, that we have opportunities to communicate to each other. We have better ways of articulating. We have psychotherapy. I know, some aspects of it can really be, the kids are out of their mind fucking. I understand that. But good therapy is talking about depth in a human being and what blocks it from coming through and how to articulate in a proper way you can actually have communication with another person and understand them. So I'm not saying everybody has to go through therapy, but but again, your therapy is as high as your therapist. It's just like going to yoga, right? You can go to yoga in the parks department. It's okay, Then you go to yoga with somebody who's like, India returned or somebody like that. All of a sudden, wow, this is a very, very different experience, even though they're both yoga. So I'm saying there's good therapy that, just take Freudian therapy 5 days a week for 7 years. You're still neurotic at the end of, you're still wetting your bed. You've learned a lot about yourself, but so it's a great question, But it's true. The United States, you have to look up. Always look like you're positive and on top of it all like that. And that's
Where did she live?
Phony. Sorry?
Well,
Where'd you live?
Did she live?
Yeah.
Japan, and that's also not
Oh.
a therapy culture either.
Oh, keep together. Oh, save face. Yeah. Then women didn't fare well there. No matter how much you want to, look at the geisha, as the ritual haiter or prostitute and put it, no, I'm sorry. Death before, yeah. The ritual prostitute. I did, yeah. The ritual prostitute. So a really good question. I'll have to think about it. But again, for me, Eden is in the future. It's not in the past. So although I take some things that are important from, as I see it, from ancient culture, I said there are a lot of things about them that were neurotic, and I'm not going to glorify that. There's things that are much, much better about, or potentially better about what we have available to us now. But certainly it's not, Satya is truth in yoga, right? So fessing up to your emotions, like we say in the men's group, your truth is welcome here, whatever it is. If it's not a pleasant truth or a nasty truth or whatever, but it's true, I trust you more because you told me the truth than just putting a nice face on, yeah? Great. Good question. Somebody else?
Did you ever go to Esalen?
I'm going there when I go up the West Coast with my wife in a couple of days, yes.
You seem like the founders. I don't know if you know anything about Esalen.
I do. Sure I do.
Taking psychedelics.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's
Lots
okay.
of things, but you just seem like you would be hanging out with them.
It's the kind of place to hang out in, for sure. Thank you. I hope to get there. But, my wife is more.
You just came back, so.
My wife is more modest than me, so I see if I can get her in the tub, even with clothes on. We're just, I don't care. Can we take a massage outside? Whatever, But again, the queen rules. I serve at the pleasure of the queen. So whatever she wants to do, I will do. I'll just suggest, and then we'll see what happens.
I'm wondering if you can help reconcile two of the themes that you talked about. One of them is living life with joy, being exuberant, and that's contagious and helps make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Versus honoring all your feelings, right, which oftentimes aren't joy.
True.
How do you?
Well, it's
or maybe you don't. Maybe it just is.
Somebody once asked a chess master, what's the best move in chess? And his response was, it's always situational. How can I give you one move? It depends on where the game board is. So in general, I would say you cultivate a joyous lifestyle, but if that's not what's on your plate in the moment, then the truth and reality of what it is, or the truth of what is, that's what you deal with. So if what you're feeling now is anger, then it's an angry moment. You don't try to say, the Buddha says don't get angry. They say getting angry with somebody else is like grabbing a hot coal to shove in somebody else's eye. You burn yourself first. So this is one of the major problems with what I think like naive yogic thinking, right? I should be peaceful all the time. I should be joyous all the time. But I'm not. Yeah, so the idea is you learn through what he's trying to teach you is if you're already angry, don't pretend you're not angry. But can you wake up after you're angry and realize, oh my God, I just was like totally threw a tantrum on this person. Oh my God, I can't do that. Well, a moment of consciousness, because before that, you got angry, and then 8 hours later, you're still justifying to other people. Do you know why this guy pissed me off so much? You didn't get it yet. Oh, but now I realize, oh yeah, I didn't want to do that. I acted in a way, I know I'm capable of better than that. Then the next stage is to get to the place where, as I'm giving you the what for, not after the fact, I realize, I can't talk about this now. I'll deal with it later. Caught it then. Then the next stage is to realize, as I'm getting angry, right, I feel my fist tightening, I feel my biting my lip, I feel my breath getting heavy. I'm formulating my mind what I'm going to say. Oh, I got it at that level. Then, if you continue to work, the fantasies, you'll get to the place where you don't get angry, you wouldn't be a human being. But you'll be like the Zen master who says to a student, I'm so angry. What? I've been with you 20 years. I've never seen you get angry. I know, it's just that I get it back so quickly you don't notice I got angry. So I don't know about reconciling it, because again, it's using two value systems that seem to be contradictory to one another. But you're really imposing this yogic idea, and again, yoga, certainly harmlessness is a good thing. Don't unnecessarily spew the worst toxic stuff that you have on anybody, including your loved ones, or especially your loved ones. But drawing boundaries for yourself, what's appropriate, what's timing, diplomacy. You can, clean anger is one of the greatest gifts you can give another person. Clean anger, right? I married an Irish woman. In Gaelic, there is no verb to say I'm angry with you or I'm angry at you. You can only say there's anger between us. So the connection is the first thing. The verb tense doesn't allow it to seem like there's a separateness there. So it's a very intimate thing to get angry with somebody else, but to put it out in a clean way where you're not just trying to just, bury them, but to let them know, like something is off, I don't feel good about it, and I'm letting you know. That's an act of intimacy. Into me you see. That's an act of intimacy, right? Most of the time we fear doing that. But it's the same thing, like I can't be sad with my wife and I can't get pissed with each other and like bump shoulders and bare a fang every now and then. So it seems contradictory. Hey, Walt Whitman, I contradict myself, I contain multitudes. So I'm joyous many moments and then something else happens. No, I feel down about that. Right? But I got to continue, you got to continue to you got to feed the thing to make it be alive in this moment. This is one of the psychological sleight of hands, When a person comes to class, I say the teacher that guarantees the least disappoints the least. And the only guarantee I give is when you put your shoes back on, whatever problems you had when you came here, you'll still have them when you put your shoes back on. Oh. So give yourself a break while you're in the yoga shala to power up with what you need to, because when you go back at it, the karma is still there, right? Oh, that's a hard thing to do, but you want to face that karma, right? You can't get rid of it, right? So the Sedona method is realizing that up to right now, whatever problems you've had, they only exist as a memory in this moment. The only way they can continue to exist is if you choose to power them up by saying, wait a second, no, you don't understand me, my case is special. And I say, no, I understand that. I know you fought long and hard to do the family intervention, but just for now, could you not do that? Could you not bring that here? Of course you could. Well, you would? Well, when? And then come up with another excuse. And your mind will continue to rationalize about how you cling to the very thing you say, I wish I didn't have. Right? But you always can drop it. We used to say cop and drop in the hippie tradition, right? Cop and drop. You realize it? Yeah, let it go. Right? So you become like a Buddhist, right? Doesn't matter what you don't cling to, just don't cling. So, you feel joy is great. But you're tracking what's meditation, if not moment to moment, instant to instant, paying attention so I don't miss a thing. You ought to know. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling joy, whatever. And then each emotion has an appropriate way of coming to closure. You have to learn to express it so that it finishes so you can move on to the next thing.